welcome to Business Talk, brought to you by the Sharonville Chamber of Commerce. I'm Brent Scarce with Emory Federal Credit Union. I'm your host, and today here in studio we have Karl Ulrich with Sebaly Shillito Dyer here to talk to us about performance reviews. Karl?
Hi, Brett. How are you?
Great. How are you doing?
Doing well, thank you.
So if I want to do a performance review for my employees, is it a big deal as to the format? Can I just like sit down and say, hey, you're doing all right? Or do I need to be thinking about some specific procedures and some processes here?
Yeah, I think you do want to have some procedures. Yeah, you want to have some systems in place, and you want to use a performance evaluation that you've thought about ahead of time. Something in writing with some categories that you've established ahead of time so that the employee knows what they're doing, what the expectations are, and then you know, after a period of time, after you look back at a period of performance and you judge them based on those previously communicated categories. So it's a process. It's something that you put in place when someone is hired. And then you know, there are some things that I think a lot of performance evaluations will have in common. You'll want to evaluate people on their social skills. You know, we work in an environment these days with team members. We place a premium now, even more than we've ever had, on the ability to work within a team, to work well and play well with others,
yeah,
to coin a phrase. And so, but then there are also some job-specific requirements that you may design around a particular position. So there's some combination of soft skills and technical skills that you definitely want to build into that performance evaluation.
Yeah. Now, can an employer get in trouble? How they handle that with so much of the you know, the litigation that goes on with, you know, people saying they're harassed at work, or you know, just, you know, all the different types of personalities that are out there now that, you know, to everyone else something's disruptive, but to them it could be offensive saying that that's disruptive.
Right. Well, a good performance evaluation really is, it's oftentimes not only what you say, but it's how you say it. You know, it's how you say it. But I think performance evaluations, when they go wrong largely because supervisors or evaluators are oftentimes too lenient, not as honest as they should be.
They don't want to hurt feelings.
Right? They don't want to hurt feelings, or
confrontation,
or for good reason. They want to properly encourage employees, so they give them a strong performance evaluation, which may not be otherwise deserved, but mainly to give them a sense of positive movement, positive reinforcement, which is a nice thing to do. The problem with that, though, is that oftentimes when the wheels come off, or if an employee is having difficulty performing, and you've got in the record a strong performance evaluation, and then have a disconnect.
What happened? I was wonderful.
Right. You have a disconnect, and the employee, in some ways, doesn't have an understanding about really what's going on. You've got the performance. The personnel file will have a disconnect, a disagreement between what the performance evaluation says and that performance improvement plan that was put in place 60 days later. That kind of thing. Yeah. And you know, the risk of that, too, is that I think a lot of good employees really want to be told where their performance needs improvement. They really want constructive feedback, honest feedback, because I think the folks that you really want to keep, the folks that you really want to develop and encourage are those people who are looking for positive feedback. They know they're not perfect. Nobody is. And so I think a good supervisor will, in the right way, point out those areas, and then that really gives the employee an opportunity to improve. Whereas if you're always very positive in the performance evaluations, those employees don't get the opportunity to improve because they haven't been told where those areas are that actually need that improvement. So again, I think honesty is one of the big keys here, and
it doesn't have to be combative and really really demeaning or anything. It's just I think sometimes supervisors are just really afraid of conflict, and it's easier for them to just say, yeah, you're fine.
And we find as an attorney, I can say in litigation, I do employment-based litigation very often, and where we sometimes have difficulty in presenting the rationale, the employer's rationale, is where we've got a performance record which may contain some write-ups at sort of the end of a long tenure, and that leading ultimately to termination. But we have a more formal performance evaluation which may have, in a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being top-notch, all 5s. And so you've got that the documentation record of performance which doesn't agree. It doesn't help establish the reasons for termination. And in litigation, that undermines the credibility of the employer. So you've got to really have a discipline process in place. You've got to you do have to train your supervisors on how to properly fill out and communicate those evaluations.
Yeah, I know I've had some supervisors in the past, where there's a grading, scale of like a 1 to 5, and they pretty much, their policy is they don't ever give anyone 5s because they feel that no one's ever completely arrived and been totally perfect. Not that they can't give someone a 3.5 or a 4 and say really positive things, that they do a lot of things really well, but that they could improve on this, and this, and everybody wins there, I think, in that situation, because the employee actually gets the affirmation that they're doing a pretty good job, but they know what the bar is as far as if you want to really kind of step that up a notch, this is what we would be looking for,
right? And
that helps everybody.
I really like performance evaluations that use numbered scales, but also have each number is associated with a description. So the classic that I've seen that I really like is something that says fails to meet expectations is a 1, exceeds expectations is a 5, meets expectations maybe a 4, needs improvement. There may be other levels within that 1 to 5 scale. And then when you say someone exceeds expectations, what does that mean? The expectation of the job is this, but exceeding an expectation is going above and beyond what the job otherwise requires. Yeah. And then when you think about it that way, a 5 really ought to be a pretty rare thing. Yeah. Now, it's really good employees do hit 5s. Sure. And occasionally you see that, but again, that's the risk with valuations, and supervisors most of the time want to be really positive, and so they may inflate those numbers a little bit unnecessarily and inappropriately. But the other thing I like with performance evaluations is using examples. I think a good written performance evaluation not only has a scale of 1 to 5, but also has a section where the supervisor can add examples. Okay. So if you're giving somebody a needs improvement score, maybe a 2 or something along those lines, you, I think, should be prepared to give them examples of why it's a 2. Here's a situation or a particular project you worked on, and you write that into the little comment section of the evaluation. It's an example of a project you did that didn't meet expectations, and why that was important to us as an organization, or to the project leader or whoever happens to be working with them. Yeah. Those examples, I think, help demonstrate and help make those scoring make that scoring exercise more credible when you communicate it to them. Yeah, because they remember.
There's a total example, of them, there and what you're talking about.
Right, it's very specific.
You're not just saying, well, I just a lot of times don't like the way you do this. Right. Or there's a specific reason and a specific example, and as to why, maybe how it cost a project, or cost them additional work hours or something like that.
Timeliness. You worked. I assigned this project, Project X, and the deadline was that Friday, and we didn't get the project deliverable until the following Monday, and that was a problem because. And so you can add that comment, and then talk about it in the evaluation. And this is one of the areas that needs improvement, and we're going to look at that for the next evaluation period, usually 6 months or a year or something like that. So, so those are some common, I think, techniques to really juice up that evaluation process and make it more meaningful, both for the supervisor, the organization, but especially for the employee.
Yeah, a lot of times employees are looking for a way to be able to move up the ladder and get promoted, and a performance review is a great opportunity for them to kind of get an idea as to what it's going to take to do that. Now, have you ever found issues where employers don't progress people up the ladder. They tell them this stuff, people do that stuff, and then they still don't progress them. Is there a danger of getting yourself in trouble, in those areas?
Well, sure, and
promoting people that they say, hey, you said if I did this and this, I'd be able to be promoted.
Just as there's a problem in inflating scores, there's also from time to time supervisors who may not be fair in their evaluation. On the other side, may be a little too critical or a little too harsh, and so that can happen often as well. And so what another good thing to do in an evaluation process is where it's where you have the kind of an organization where you have multiple people working on a project or working together, or multiple supervisors working with an evaluated employee. You get multiple observations, multiple evaluations. You get several different people evaluating that.
It's not just one that might have kind of an axe to grind with that employee.
Right. So whenever that's possible, I think you do that because it's fairer to the employee. It sort of helps diminish any particular prejudice or bias that a particular individual might have. If everybody's in agreement, that lends credibility to the evaluation, whereas if a particular supervisor is an outlier or unduly biased, tends to diminish the impact of that. It's a little fairer to the employee. So that's another good best practice, I think, to follow in many cases.
Is there a particular train wreck of a situation that you've ever had to deal with regards to performance reviews, someone that just totally just did it bad?
Yeah, we've had situations, I think, where that disconnect we talked about earlier, where the perception, the get to a point now where the person just has to be terminated. They're not performing well. They haven't done a good job. They've made some major errors, major mistakes, but they're a high risk, for litigation. This is a situation where the company has some concern about the potential for a dispute, legal dispute down the road, so they need to make a move, but they have that risk out there. So you go and look at the performance record, and you see some write-ups, but then you see this standardized evaluation with inflated scores. Only 45 days, 2 months before the termination, and of course that essentially undermines the entire process. It really restricts what the employer is able to do. Not fair to the employee, for one thing, but the employee has the argument that, well, if you really wanted me to improve, you should have told me where I should have improved. I could have fixed my performance had you been honest with me. You didn't give me that chance. So from their perspective, there's a issue. From the employer's perspective, it's hard now to terminate that person without legal risk if you've got documents that don't agree, that don't tell the true story.
In your own files.
In your own files, right? Documents that the supervisor's prepared in accordance with supposed standard procedure, but those things just don't tell the right story. And so that really is the nightmare scenario. And I think that, and the other thing that can happen is that, we talk about putting comments and using examples. Excellent ideas should be done. How you word those things also can be a problem. So if you make, comments about protected status in the commentaries, which is a silly, stupid thing to do, but you'd be surprised how often that happens. And so you'll have editorial comments made in these where the supervisor just isn't thinking through why they're saying what they're saying in the evaluation, and those can later on become
comments
evidence
about their age, or
right, and it could later become evidence of illegal bias, and so you have to be very careful how you phrase the comments. But there's a right way and a wrong way to do all performance evaluations, and you really do have to train the supervisors. You really, as an HR professional or as a business owner, I think it's really worth spending the time for those who are doing evaluations. Sit them down and say, okay, here's what our evaluation does. Here's how we use it, and here's what you should do and shouldn't do, and spend once a year going through that.
So you do see that they're valuable.
Absolutely.
To be used. I've heard some folks say, I do the performance review every day. I work with them every day, and I tell them right away whether they're doing things right or wrong.
Well, it's a good point. I think you've missed something in the supervisory process if you sit down in the formal annual evaluation and these criticisms are heard by the employees for the first time. If it's the first time in that formal evaluation that they're hearing any of these criticisms, something's wrong.
Yeah.
I think good supervisors, good managers talk to their employees, interact with them on a regular basis, provide, and to that point, provide ongoing feedback,
Yeah.
both good and bad.
Yeah.
Good and bad.
Yeah.
When
And most
somebody
employees
does something well, you
appreciate
tell
that,
them that. Yeah.
I think by and large they appreciate it because they don't want to just be out, am I doing this right?
Well, and it's not a shock then when they sit down and they say, okay, we're going to look at the whole year now. We're going to summarize some of the things we've already talked about. Here are some of the mistakes you made, but here are some good things that you did.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw some progress over the course of the year. It's not just a snapshot of time. It's also a progression of events over a period of time. And I think you've got to be, as a supervisor, working with employees on a regular basis to provide them that feedback.
Great information. Carl, hopefully everybody will take this and utilize it and hopefully do these properly on an annual basis and not spring things on people going forward. So really appreciate the information. Our guest has been Karl Ulrich with Sebaly Shillito Dyer. You've been watching Business Talk, and we'll see you right back here next time.